Hey everyone, John here! And with Switch 2, there is a mix of good and bad, and so I wanted to weigh the two against each other, find an equal amount of loves and don't loves, and see exactly which one outweighs the other, and you can decide, is it more love, is it more don't love? We'll see by the end, but let's begin with the first thing I love about Nintendo Switch 2. The Switch 1 and the Wii U have a power difference, but they're not exactly a world apart, and so you can argue Nintendo's been rocking very similar hardware since around 2012, and that was 13 years ago. We're finally ready for that power leap, and this is affecting Nintendo first-party games. Interestingly though, Nintendo aren't just throwing in more detail. We haven't really seen an overly detailed Switch 2 game from them, in fact. They're using this power to change the gameplay. Mario Kart's going open world. You can just drive around and find any course in the game contextually to where it is in the world. And Donkey Kong is just going Red Faction Guerrilla, quite literally. You can just rip out parts of the environment and form your way through the levels yourselves, find your own path, improvise. Nintendo's never been able to do this type of gameplay before, and it's really interesting to see them prioritize gameplay over visuals, even with this massive glow-up in specs. But what I don't love is game key cards. The vast majority of third-party games at launch, at least, come on game key cards. And what these are is they are dummy cartridges that have no real data on them and just download the game. They're better than download codes because you can still sell them afterwards. They act like a physical game in that regard, but still, this blows. Especially because the Switch 2 is getting a lot more current-gen ports like Split Fiction, which are 73 gigabytes. And by the way, Split Fiction does not even come on a game key card, that's a code in a box. Code in a box has not been defeated. This is a whole issue with just file sizes and game cards, and it's not looking too swell right now. However, I love game cards! We don't know that many games that are actually coming on game cards. We know the first-party Nintendo ones are, and that's great, but their file sizes aren't exactly vast. But look at Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk is using a 64GB game card, and the reason I love that so much is since the PlayStation 3 and PS4 and PS5, basically every game needs to be installed before you play. It makes sense, disk reading speeds aren't as high as an SSD or even a hard drive, so there's a necessity to doing this. But it eats up your hard drive, man, and when you pick up a game and just want to play it straight away, you can't do that, you've got to wait through the install. But with Cyberpunk, you can just slide that cartridge in, not use any space on your internal storage, and just play. This is a huge pro above other competing consoles. It saves you storage space, it's immediate, and these game cards are basically mini little SSDs. You'll still get the really fast load times you get from the standard internal storage. These things are magnificent, but barely any games are actually using them right now. And the second thing I don't love is the overly familiar UI. And look, I'm not the biggest Switch UI hater in the world. I think it's serviceable, it's quick, it does what it needs to do, but this is also a brand new console, and it's very reminiscent of going from Xbox One to Series X, where things haven't really changed, and you need that new feeling to a console to make it feel fresh and different, but that's not really the case here. We get some new icons like being able to game share and game chat, but other than that, this is an evolution of the Switch 1 UI, rather than a changed Switch 1 UI. It's a little bit rounder, there's a bit more stuff, but otherwise this is pretty much the same. Hopefully there's themes this time. We haven't actually seen the dark theme yet, so as far as we know it's just the light theme, but that can't be the case, can it? The third thing I love is the mouse. This is ingenious. Like, who looked at a JoyCon, just turned it on its side and said, this could be a mouse? We know who did it, they're in the interview, but it's still really, really clever. Now I hear you. John, console games have been using mice as inputs for decades at this point. In Half-Life for the PlayStation 2, you can use a mouse, and that's true. But how many people are going out of their way to plug in a mouse and keyboard to their consoles? Games may support it, and it's great when they do, but when it's built in to the controller itself, not only is it more versatile so more people will actually use it, but it's also going to make developers actually support it. There's really no reason that any Switch 2 first-person shooter shouldn't support the mouse, and we're seeing strategy games like Civ 7 support the mouse. It's going to make these games arguably play the best on console on Switch 2, while also inviting a bunch of PC genres to finally make their way to a console. And it also evolves beyond a PC mouse. There's rumble in the JoyCon, so you can feel tactile feedback while moving the mouse around, or feel vibrations when shooting. But also there's two of them. So few PC games support two mice, I can't think of a single one in fact. But this allows you to multitask, or allows multiplayer, or even allows you just to do new kind of gameplay possibilities like drag and drive. I adore everything about the mouse, but one thing I don't adore is game pricing. Now, for the most part, third-party games are pretty much in line with either other consoles or Switch 1. It's not looking too bad in that regard, but Nintendo have stepped it up. It seems $70 is going to be the standard for their premium games, so like Donkey Kong Bonanza is $70. And that's kinda hard to swallow. Tears of the Kingdom was the first to do that, but with games like Donkey Kong, it's like, it does feel like you're pushing the boat out there. But then Mario Kart World is $80, and that's really pushing the boat out there. Now, I think most of us are buying it in the bundle, which is way, way cheaper, but still to have this at $80 on store shelves feels egregious. It's incredibly expensive. Hopefully there aren't many or any more $80 games, but it's still $70 as a standard is very high. And it's true that other consoles do that too, but I'm not a fan of it there either. But one thing I do love is the performance. And we talked about this a little bit with first-party games, but I feel this is quite a different category. For one, the screen on the handheld is 120Hz. And while other consoles support 120Hz, the feature isn't commonly supported. And I feel like having it built into the system itself is going to make developers really take advantage of it. Like, there's no real reason that many indie games shouldn't run at 120. Why can't all these sprite-based games just run at a full 120 FPS on the Switch 2 screen? But then, of course, you also get games like Metroid Prime 4, 120 FPS. It sounds absolutely delightful. And the Switch 2 storage plus microSD Express cards are basically little SSDs, so you're getting faster load times very similar to PS5 and Series X on a handheld. We've seen already that Mario Kart World's loading times are around 3 or 4 seconds, which is incredibly impressive. All these Switch 2 edition games load faster too, like Breath of the Wild is so much faster on Switch 2 than it is Switch 1. And then just overall performance as a whole, we're getting games like Street Fighter 6, Cyberpunk, Elden Ring, and it is true that those games all run on PlayStation 4 as well, but you can say the same for most PlayStation 5 games, so there's definitely still a very impressive precedent to having these on a portable, and it's still very modern. But another thing I don't love is all the unclear marketing. Now this isn't Wii U level, people understand the system, but there's all these smaller parts which are just being very poorly communicated and are spreading tons of misinfo. People thought Switch 2 editions weren't on the cartridge. They are. People thought Mario Kart World was $90. It's not, it's $80. Not much better, but it's not $90. We haven't got all the info we need. GameShare, which is something I'll talk about in just a little bit, works online. But we don't know how it works online. We don't know what free updates all these games are getting. Many of them are for GameShare, but what about Link's Awakening and Echoes of Wisdom? What are you updating those with? Is it performance? We don't know. There is so much more to communicate, but they're kind of letting us do it, which isn't the best thing to do when we're not the source. You're the source, Nintendo. Very odd. But what I do love is backwards compatibility, and this was a real fear. My Switch library is massive, and one thing the Switch did really well was it built up great legacy games. It got so many Wii U and GameCube and Wii games and PS2 games and Xbox games and Super Nintendo games, all this stuff built into one of the best legacy libraries around, and to start that from scratch would be excruciating. But there's also so many brilliant original Switch games, and bringing those forwards is delightful. And we also know that some of them will benefit from performance enhancements without even needing a patch. For example, Yoshi's Crafted World loads faster on the Switch 2. Not a Switch 2 edition, this is just a standard backwards compatible game. And to have that for Animal Crossing New Horizons, a very long loading game, would be amazing. And we don't know exactly yet how the frame rates smooth out. Hopefully they go towards their caps. So if it's a 30 FPS game, it stays at 30, or a 60 FPS game stays at 60. We don't know those details quite yet, but hopefully that is the case. But what I don't love is, again, a lot of this isn't clear. There's a backwards compatibility website, and it tells you what is working and what still needs more testing. And what's very clear is every first-party Nintendo game works apart from Labo VR. And that makes sense because the Switch 2 can't fit in the Labo VR cardboard, it's too big. But then you look at the third-party games, and all of a sudden, I don't quite know what is actually verified to work. Is it everything in the top chart? Is it everything in the first 2 bars? Because this says it may need further testing. Does that mean it works? I don't know, and they don't tell you. They really don't tell you. This is something we'll figure out at launch, I suppose, but again, it's just very unclear marketing. But you know what I do love? NSO. And it feels really weird to say that. All the legacy libraries are at a point where there's lots of really good games, and then there's original games like Tetris and F-Zero, which are some of the best on the entire system. But that's not really what I'm talking about. What I'm getting at is the price. So Street Fighter 6, I played quite a bit on PS5 when it came out, but there's so many subscription services when it comes to watching movies and TV shows and playing games online that PSN was axed from my just constant budget. I subscribe every now and then, but it's not a constant thing. And so I'm not paying $80 a year for PSN. But Nintendo Switch Online, at the minimum, is $20, and that's not even really the minimum. See, I pay £45 a year for the family expansion plan, and then I divide that between 8 people, and we're all paying £5.60 a year for the premium subscription. So what I'm saying is I'm paying £5.60 a year to play Street Fighter 6 online, as well as any other multi-platform games like Elden Ring, whereas on PSN, it would be so much more than that. And Game Pass isn't much better. Game Pass Core is $75 a year. It's true that you don't get all the free games, but it depends what you value. And personally, I have a big enough collection of physical games that I don't really value all the free stuff. And the legacy stuff is just nice to have as a bonus. So I'm very happy all these modern multiplayer games will be playable on Switch 2 for the lowest online subscription. Call of Duty, I can play for £5.60 a year when that comes to the Switch 2. But what I don't love is Welcome Tour will not be included. And Welcome Tour reeks of 3DS AR games, it reeks of Face Raiders, fun, cool things, but also just kind of part of the system. And that is amplified even further with this being a guided tour of the system. It tells you about how all its features work, and so it's very strange that this is a $10 game. That said, a lot of the mini-games do look really cool. There's lots of variety in here, showing you what the Switch 2 can do from an input perspective when it comes to HD Rumble 2, or the gyro, or the mouse, or whatever else, including the frame rates too, but it really should have just come with the system. It's a very confusingly priced game. But what I do love is the faster eShop, and this has been redesigned too. Now your wish list is at the very front of the page, and it gives you recommendations based on your preferences and your friends' preferences as well. But look how fast it is to load a store page compared to Switch 1. This is what we needed. The Switch 1 eShop wasn't that bad when it first came out, when it was just like 10 games. But now there's like 16,000 games, and loading anything is an absolute slog. But now Switch 2 just seems to blaze through it all. That is such a huge benefit to just the browsing experience, and it's going to make Switch 2 just nicer to use. But you know what I don't love? The extremely short-term roadmap. And this won't be an issue in like a month when they announce more games for the thing. But as people who have pre-ordered the system, we haven't exactly been given a whole lot of confidence about the future. In terms of first party, we know there's Mario Kart, we know there's Donkey Kong, and then there's Dragon Drive. And Donkey Kong's 1 month after the system. Dragon Drive is undated, but it's not exactly a huge game. So after that first month, in July, what's coming after? The Switch 2 editions? Is it just Metroid Prime 4 and Pokemon to look forward to? Obviously not. They're going to announce more games, but it's just weird not to have that roadmap. With Switch 1, we knew basically the entire year of first party after that first January presentation. But now there's so many gaps. Even third party isn't really dated beyond July. There's only a few games we actually know of that are coming in their specified date. Again, a short-term issue, but I'd really like to know what exactly is going to make this system keep going beyond its first initial launch period. But you know what I've grown to really yearn for with more info? It's the controllers, both the Pro Controller 2 and the JoyCon 2. So HD Rumble 2 is a really understated part of the system. We've got a whole video about our impressions with HD Rumble 2.
it gives you feedback beyond the DualSense. It's like an evolution of that. And as we stated earlier, it works in mouse mode too, so you get new sensations and new applications for Rumble. And impressions for the Pro Controller too have been incredibly positive. I've heard many say that this is their favorite controller of all time. It is very similar to the first Pro Controller, but it feels different. The sticks particularly feel different, and you can whack them around without really hearing any noise. And this has HD Rumble 2 as well. It's got gyro, it's got a headphone jack, it's got the GL and the grrr button. And one thing that I was quite wary about was the D-pad, because the D-pad in the first Pro Controller wasn't great, but impressions have been really good about that too. And in the Ask the Developers interview, they even say that that has gone through a refinement as well. The only real unknown is JoyCon drift. I don't think they'd replicate that again. That's just my hope. But yeah, we don't actually know if that's for sure gone. But I would bet some money on it not being as prevalent this time. I don't love, though, that there is no OLED version. It would have been really cool to have two SKUs at launch, a standard one and an OLED one. Obviously that'd be more expensive, but I think I'd pay for it because I really love that OLED screen on the Switch 1. Now, people have been positive about the Switch 2 screen. It's got HDR, it's 1080p now, it's 120Hz. Like, that's all great stuff. The viewing angles are good too, it's more vivid. But vivid isn't really what OLED is about. Like, you can get more vivid colors, but it's really about the pure blacks. And those pure blacks are not there now. They're less grey than the standard Switch 1 screen, but they're definitely not the pure black that the OLED gives you. And I expect an OLED revision will come along in a few years' time, but as an OLED Switch 1 user, I kinda want it now. Give it to me now. But I do love Game Share. We talked about this a bit earlier. Game Share is basically the evolution of download play. Obviously with DS, you could just send along like a 10 megabyte file to another user and play a game with each other without them actually owning the game. They'll just download a small part of that. And that has become increasingly impossible, because you can't just send someone a 10 gigabyte version of the game. That's going to take ages. So Game Share is utilizing the Wii U streaming tech, going from the console to the gamepad, to basically share that display to another user. So in Clubhouse games, for example, you can all play Uno together from your own perspective, but streaming from one console. And we know that Split Fiction is going to do the same thing as well. Of course, that game comes with a guest version, but if your guest doesn't want to download a 73 gigabyte game, you can just send it to them without downloading anything. And in Split Fiction's case, that works with the Switch 1 as well, so your Switch 2 can share to the Switch 1 and play together, even though that game can't natively run on the Switch 1. And what's even cooler about Game Share is this is not just a local thing, this works online as well. They showed it for 3D World during the Direct, but we also know that Fast Fusion is going to use Game Share both locally and online too. And there's a lot more info to learn about how that actually works online, but really cool. That's a huge feature. But you know what I do not love? It is the battery life. So this is kind of expected as tech grows. The Switch 2's battery life is estimated between 2 hours and 6.5 hours. And I imagine the 6.5 hours is backwards compatible stuff, and the 2 hours is more just heavy Switch 2 games. I imagine Cyberpunk is going to last around 2 hours. And I think contextually to what that game is, contextually to any other PC handheld, 2 hours is actually pretty good for such a heavy game. But if I went back in time and told little John, playing Minish Cap on his GBA, that a future handheld would have a 2-hour battery life, he would say, where did we go wrong? Like, it makes sense given what we have here, but it's still underwhelming all the same. But I do love magnetic JoyCon. When I first got my Switch 1, that JoyCon rail felt so sturdy. But with time, with all that snapping on and off, with all that gliding, it has become incredibly loose. Not to the point where I've ever just dropped my system, but every now and then I will nudge a Joy-Con off, and that gets quite irritating during an online game like F-Zero, because it brings up the prompt screen to reconnect your Joy-Con, and you just lose all inputs while everyone else just races off. With the Joy-Con 2, they connect magnetically, and it seems like a much more sturdier and easy to use thing, especially for the wrist straps. I hate the wrist straps on the Switch 1 because they're just really finicky to get on and off, whereas now, they just snap on and off. It's really simple, and it seems like a great evolution of the rail idea, just making it more sturdy, easier, better. But I don't love, and this is the last thing, I don't love American politics. This may have been the most confusing launch period for Americans ever. It was quite simple everywhere else, but everywhere affected by American politics, like America and Canada, pre-orders were a big unknown, and as were the tariff effects. And it seems like Nintendo are just eating the cost of the tariff. They're not passing that cost on to us, but they are passing the cost on to accessories. So, Amiibo, for the Street Fighter 6 Amiibo, they're now $40 each, which is nuts. Most accessories haven't gone up that much. There's like a $5 to $10 increase, but it gets pretty high up there, and it must affect their bottom line quite a bit to have to, eat up those tariff costs. Obviously, that's not a big deal for the consumer, but what a mess this has all been for all tech. I've seen so many laptops and phones and just general manufacturing suffer from these tariffs. And right now, the special edition for Rune Factory is in flux because there's a fan that's made in China over there. And they're not sure if they can get that out at launch now. So that special edition might miss the launch period while the main game still hits. But it's affected everybody. So I don't love American politics. Let that be said. Controversial opinion.
So, I can't speak for all of you, but just personally, weighing my strengths versus my weaknesses, I think there are a lot more strengths, a lot stronger strengths than there are weaknesses. And most of the weaknesses for me are logistical. It's about Welcome Tour not being included. It's about Mario Kart World being $80. It's about $70 standard pricing. It's things like that. But the actual system itself, I think is wonderful. I think the hardware jump is really great for a handheld system, and the games it's getting are really exciting. I wish we knew more of them beyond just the launch month or so, but that stuff is going to come, so it's a pretty short-term way of thinking. So hopefully a lot more of this is ironed out, hopefully the communication gets way better, but the system itself, I can't wait for. Anyway, we will see you in around like a month and a week when this system launches, and it'll be a lot less hypotheticals and a lot more definitives. So, we'll see you next time, everyone. Bye-bye. I'm not seeing you in a month, but I will do more things before the month. I'm just saying it launches in a month. I'll still be around. But bye!